Hey guys, what is going on? We're about to get into a little video podcast action. And so let me warn you guys on the front end here. If you don't love baseball and or you are not a physique athlete, I don't know that the next 25 minutes are going to be a good use of your time hanging with us for this video podcast, because today is very much about baseball and very much about the competitive landscape of physique athletes. And so I'm doing my best to marry those two worlds together. So just be forewarned. If you don't love at least one of those two, then this might not be your jam. But if you do decide to stick around, hey, you are my all-time favorite. And I really hope you get a little bit of value from this. Hey, Jim Schultz here for the F Cubed podcast. And man, we are back for a little video edition of the podcast. And so if you guys are checking me out over on YouTube, hey, thank you. You guys are amazing. I think amazing and even amazing. I think I figured out the audio video delay. So my hope is that this doesn't look and sound like a 1981, Kung Fu classic on late night TV, but it still might, because this is very much a gradual process that I'm just trying to build up to over time. But hopefully we got that figured out. Nevertheless, man, this is, this one's going to be a little bit out there, I think. This topic, this subject is going to be, it's a little bit of a reach, but it's still something that just dawned on me recently. And so let me let you all know on the front end. I probably already led with this in the intro, but let me go ahead and double down on this just to let you know that, hey, this may not be the greatest use of your time. If you are not A, a baseball fan, and or B, a competitive physique athlete yourself, then everything that follows for the next 15, 20, 25 minutes, however long we can go, might not make a lot of sense to you. It might not be a great use of your time, especially if you're not a baseball fan, because we're going to dig into baseball as our reference point for the analogy that I'm going to draw between baseball and, really serious physique transformation, really serious, the really serious competitive landscape for physique athletes. I really think that it's so similar. And being a baseball guy myself, it just made a lot of sense to go ahead and kind of unpack this analogy. And so I haven't fully thought through every single nook and cranny, but I have kind of a rough outline in my head. And so that's why I felt like, hey, let's go ahead and uncover all the nooks and crannies together here on air, and let's just kind of see what happens. So as you guys know, if you've been following my journey at all, I am a competitive bodybuilder. I've been competing since 2001, and my career has gone through, I don't even want to say ups and downs, mostly downs for the first, 14 years, I would say. But then the last 5 years or so, I think I've kind of figured some things out. And as a result, I've come in looking better. I've placed higher. I've done all those things. And then this fall, on November 23rd, actually, I'm looking to earn my pro card. I took second place last time I competed in 2017 in a pro qualifier. And so this fall, I'm looking to finish the job on November 23rd. And so that's what we got coming on down the chutes from a competitive landscape standpoint. So that being said, thinking through my journey, right, and thinking through bodybuilding as a whole, and then also kind of being saddened by the fact that as of just, a couple hours ago or like a day or two ago, the Boston Red Sox, my beloved Boston Red Sox, have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs now. This is after coming off of the World Series victory last year. Now they're not even going to make the playoffs. So that's obviously a pretty big disappointment. But nevertheless, I was thinking about, baseball, and I was thinking about bodybuilding. And here's kind of what I concluded. So whenever you start a new radical physique transformation, right, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the competitive landscape, but it's going to make more sense if it is. When you start that off, it's no different from starting a baseball season. The beginning of your physique transformation, like the very beginning, like the first couple of days, the first couple of weeks, are exactly like spring training in the world of baseball. What is spring training? Spring training is just where you kind of loosen up your joints. You just kind of work out the kinks. You try out some new players. You try out some new strategies. You basically are just trying to set yourself up for the regular season. That is no different from what it's like with a radical, lengthy physique transformation. Like, I'm not talking about losing 5-10 pounds. We're talking about like jaw-dropping results, right? We're talking about losing 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 pounds, right? We're talking about doing something that is going to radically change your life forever. The first couple of days, the first couple of weeks are very much, you're just kind of in discovery mode, right? They're very much where you're just like trying to figure out, all right, how am I going to set this thing up for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months? Right? Like, what is the rest of this process going to look like? I'm trying to experiment with carbs. I'm trying to experiment with fats in terms of, where I want to set my fuel sources, right? Like, where do I want my numbers to be? Which of the two do I prefer more? Like, when do I like to train? Do I like to train early in the day? Do I like to train late in the day? What is my schedule going to allow? Right? And then, of course, what type of training do I want to do? Do I want it to be mostly, obviously we already know, like you already know, you need to be weight training. So I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. But inside of that, there's still a lot of things you have to figure out. Like, am I going to do heavy weights and low reps? Or am I going to do more moderate weights with more moderate reps, right? Like, there's a number of ways you can slice it up. So no different from a baseball team figuring things out in spring training. You're going to spend the first couple of weeks figuring things out. Like, am I going to track macros or am I going to do something else? Right? Like, there's so many different ways that you can splice this up. That's exactly like spring training in the world of baseball. All right. So the analogy continues. So now in the world of baseball, what happens, right? Spring training is over and the season begins. And keep in mind, it's a long season. There are 162 games in a baseball regular season. The guys basically play every single day, right? Like in a 30-day month, they usually only have like 3 or 4 or 5 days off. So they pretty much play every single day. So the first carryover into radical physique transformation that I love is the simple length of the process. The simple length of your season, right? Again, we're not talking about losing 5 or 10 pounds. Although that in and of itself could actually take a while. We're talking about losing 30, 40, 50, 60 pounds. That's going to take a while, right? Like, if you're thinking you're going to get that done in a month, you've already beaten yourself from the beginning. That's not going to happen. It's going to take several months. It's going to take half a year. It may take a full year when you start to weave in things like reverse dieting and the other side and the back half and all the things that you should be thinking about right now, right? So we already have the length being the same between, a baseball season and radical physique transformation. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you think about the beginning of a baseball season, because the season is so long, right? Because there are so many games to play, there's not a lot of pressure there, right? There's not a ton of pressure there like to win every game. There's not a ton of pressure there like to avoid a huge losing streak. Right now, of course, you want to do that. I mean, obviously, you're stepping on the field every day to win the game. But there's not a ton of pressure to win right now. Right? You have a lot of wiggle room. You have a pretty big buffer when it comes to the mistakes that you might make. Now, think about that. Think about that as it applies to radical physique transformation. Is it really any different? Like, no, it's not any different at all. Right? Like, if you think about the beginning of your physique transformation, it's exactly the same. You're in the early stages, right? You've just gotten started. You're out of spring training, so to speak. You've figured out how you're going to train. You have figured out kind of where you're going to set your macros. Like, you have a pretty good idea how everything's going to start, right? So maybe now you're only 10 or 14 days into your official start date. But for the first couple of months, as long as you just don't do anything super crazy wrong, you're going to move the needle forward, right? There's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of room for errors and mistakes, and you can still move forward. Again, you don't have to win every single day. Like, yeah, I would hope you wake up every single day wanting to win. Like, I would hope that you wake up every single day thinking, yeah, today's the day. Today's the day where I'm going to nail my training session. Today's the day where I'm going to just dominate my macros, right? Like, I'm not going to leave, any carb or any fat gram or anything like that. I'm not going to leave any of it to chance. Like, I'm going to hit my numbers wherever I set my numbers. Or maybe you're doing, keto or clean eating or whatever, right? I'm just going to really, really get serious about that process today. Well, I don't know if you've lived in this world, this thing that we call life at all, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way, right? Sometimes, despite our best efforts, it doesn't pan out the way that we would hope that it might pan out. The day just doesn't go as you would have liked. You have something come up at work, so you have to miss your training session. You have something come up at home, so you actually have to cut your training session short. Your stove stops working when you get home, so now you've got to eat out, right? So yeah, you make a really good choice with Chipotle or Panera or fill in the blank, it doesn't matter, but it's still not the same, right? Like, now you have to navigate these obstacles that came out of nowhere. Hey, that's life, man. Anybody who thinks that stuff's not going to happen hasn't actually done this for real, in earnest, right? In this thing that we call life, on this thing that we call Earth. Right? And so keeping that in mind, it's like, wow, that's exactly like the beginning of a baseball season. I have a lot of room for error. I have a lot of wiggle room. Okay. Now the season progresses, right? So now what starts to happen? Well, in the world of baseball, the teams start to take shape, right? The teams start to develop an identity. They start to figure out their strengths and their weaknesses. They start to figure out, all right, our pitching staff is really strong. We can count on them. What we need to be concerned with is the top of our lineup, right? Like, these guys are not getting on base. These guys are just not hitting for contact. They're striking out too much. They're swinging for power. They're not drawing enough walks, like whatever. Like, the analogies go so deep and so far, right? I'm trying to really pull myself in so I don't go down that rabbit hole too far. But, for all my baseball lovers out there, you guys know what I'm saying, right? Like, you have all these holes that you need to plug. So now you're thinking, all right, if I'm going to put together a winning package, if I'm going to put together something that has a chance of winning by the end of the season, then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to be able to depend on my strengths. I'm going to have to be able to count on that pitching staff or the power in the middle of my lineup or, my defense at the corners or, again, whatever it is. I'm going to need to be able to depend on that. And then I'm going to have to improve my weaknesses at least a little bit so that they're not glaring, so that they're not just these huge weaknesses that are going to really drag us down. Now take that idea and think about it as it relates to the world of fitness. It's exactly the same, right? Like, you get your diet underway, like, you get moving with your training, you get moving with your nutrition, you get moving with whatever, and it's like, all right, I now know I'm really strong in the gym. And I don't mean strong in the literal sense, although that could be true. I just mean, like, you take your training very seriously, like, you're very consistent, you're very dedicated, like, you're very committed to your program. So the training is not the issue, but maybe your nutrition is the issue. Maybe your nutrition is your weak spot, right? Maybe you are carb cycling, which you guys know is something that I love to do, and all the students inside of Full Throttle Fat Loss are carb cycling their way to Shredsville, by the way. But maybe you are carb cycling, you're like, hey, my high days are getting a little bit out of hand, right? You're like, hey, my high days are getting a little bit too high. So that's kind of a weak spot for you, right? Like, you need to rein that in a little bit. You've got to taper that down just a little bit. These are the types of things that you become aware of as the season, gets underway, as things begin to, unfold. And so you start to realize, all right, I want to lose 45 pounds. I'm down 12 pounds and I'm a month in and I'm feeling really good, but I've got a ways to go, right? We still have 120 games to play. If I'm going to make it to down 45 pounds, I'm going to need to be able to rely on my strengths, my training, or maybe you love doing cardio or whatever. Like, I actually love doing cardio. Well, love might be a bit strong of a word. I enjoy cardio. Let's say that, especially walking outside. Like I really look forward to it a lot. Like if I'm by myself, it gives me a chance to just plug into a podcast, or sometimes I actually create my podcasts while I'm on my walks, or if I'm with my family, it gives us good family time. There are a lot of benefits to doing, kind of low intensity, steady state cardio. But whatever the strengths may be for you, it doesn't matter. Yours may be different from mine. They most likely are. You're going to lean into those strengths. And you're going to say, all right, like I've developed this framework where this is now a strength of mine. Let me lean on that moving forward, right? Let me put that in a position where I can depend on that and I can rely on that. And then what I need to do is I need to focus on these things that are dragging me down. I don't need to turn them into a strength necessarily, right? Like I need to exercise a little bit of self-awareness, and I need to understand that it might be my strengths that ultimately carry me. But the thing about radical physique transformation is it's, again, like baseball in the sense that you're going to have to be proficient at several things if you're going to be successful, right? Like if you have a baseball team, your team needs to be able to hit, they need to be able to field, they need to be able to pitch, they need to be able to, run the bases, they need to be able to do, several different things, like 4 or 5 different things. If you're going to radically alter your physique, you're going to need to be able to do at least 3 things. You're going to need to be able to train both weights and cardio, so you could split that into 2 actually. Your nutrition is going to have to be not a weakness. And then you got to be tight up top. Like your mindset has to be in the right place. It needs to be in the right frame of mind if you want to make it to the finish line, right? So there's multiple pieces to the puzzle that all have to come together if you have any hopes of making it, at the end. So in that regard, they're the same again. So as your season gets underway, you've got to look to your weaknesses and say, all right, what is dragging me down here? Is it my high days being too high? Is it the fact that I don't like training? Is it the fact that I dread my workouts? Is it the fact that, I just keep negatively talking myself out of what's possible, right? That's a very common thing that we all do from time to time. Like all 3 of these things are just examples of things that could be dragging you down. Weaknesses that are causing you to have too many stagnant weeks. Too many weeks where you didn't lose any weight. Too many weeks where you didn't burn any fat, right? These are real things that you are going to need to address. Once again, they don't need to be a strength necessarily, but they can't be a glaring weakness, right? I'm actually a huge proponent of highlighting your strengths and leaning on those strengths and using those strengths to carry you through to the end. So like for me, for example, once again, I don't mind doing cardio. That's a strength of mine. So I lean on that. So what is one of the ways that actually manifests itself in my training protocol? Well, it's pretty simple. I don't mind doing more cardio. I don't mind doing longer walks. I don't mind, allocating more minutes of cardio across the week or across the month. It allows me to eat more food with my macros and still achieve a given caloric deficit. So you can see it's all kind of working together in harmony. So then lastly, right, what happens when you get near the very end? And so this is actually what kind of started this idea in my head, because I'm getting near the very end. I mean, November 23rd is now about 9 weeks away. And so when I think about the fact that I started in like late December, right? Like I started at the end of last year. This whole process got started for me like a long time ago. Admittedly, not very well for the first 3, 4, 5 months, but I finally figured it out around like June 1st. But nevertheless, I'm only 9 weeks away, so I'm pretty close to the end now. And here's what I realized just recently that kind of caused me to find some inspiration for this podcast. I don't have that much wiggle room anymore. The margin for error has shrunk significantly for me. And that's just the game that I'm now playing. It's not spring training anymore. It's not the beginning of the season anymore. Like it's end of the season, getting into playoff baseball type stuff. So for all my baseball lovers out there, what is it like when you're in the final week of the regular season? What is it like when the playoffs begin? The intensity of everything is heightened, right? The magnitude of every moment is amplified, right? You can't afford to just lose games now. You can't afford to just, go on a losing streak right now, because if you do, the season's going to be over. And so now everything gets put under a microscope, right? Every at-bat matters. Every inning matters. Every game matters, of course, but it gets to a point where like every single pitch matters in certain situations, in certain games. And so it really gets dialed down to the micro of the micro of the micro. Now let's take that and let's apply it to physique transformation. And this is where the competitive landscape part of it really comes into play, especially for me and for any of my fellow competitors out there that might be listening to this or watching this. You're going to relate to this. We have a date set. Like for me, it's November 23rd. I don't really care how I look on November 24th. I really don't. I mean, I do to some degree because, I've worked so hard, but I know that I'm going to look pretty much the same on November 24th and November 25th. And then I think November 27th is Thanksgiving. So all bets are off on November 27th. But November 24th, 25th, 26th, right, I'm going to look pretty much the same, right? But November 23rd, I care very much how I look on that day. That, for me, is my playoffs. That, for me, is my championship game. That's what I'm working towards. And so as I position myself to bring the best package I possibly can to the stage on that day, the thing that dawned on me just a few days ago was I don't have very much wiggle room anymore. I can't afford to have a high carb day, a refeed day, where I'm 100 carbs over where I should have been. And I'm 35 grams of fat over where I should have been. Which might sound crazy, but anyone who's done this knows that's not that hard to do, right? You give me a jar of peanut butter or a side of Chipotle guacamole, and I'll do it in minutes. Minutes. So I need to be aware of my lack of wiggle room now, right? I need to be aware that I don't have the buffer that I once had. And so much like in playoff baseball, everything gets magnified and everything gets amplified, it's the same right now with my nutrition. It's the same right now with my training and my cardio. All of these inputs need to be really dialed in, right? All of these inputs need to be really, really focused now. Now, again, it's kind of a gradient, right? It's a gradual thing. At 9 weeks out, I'm starting to feel this. When I get to 5 weeks out, I'm going to feel it even more. Excuse me. When I'm 2 weeks out, I'm going to feel it, to the nth degree. Like it's going to be at maximum height and maximum potency at that point, because then it's like, all right, it's here. It's here. Like, this is it, right? You can't do anything crazy. You can't have too many huge catastrophic misses anymore, whether it be with nutrition or training or cardio or whatever, right? Like, obviously the nutritional side of that is pretty obvious, right? Like, hey, I can't have any blowout days. I can't afford to, miss my numbers too badly, because if I do, then my physique could do some crazy and wild things. But it also applies to training, right? I can't afford to do anything too, let's say, risky in the gym, right? Like, I'm not going to be getting into any max deadlift sessions. I'm not going to be getting into any max squat sessions. I'm not even going to be doing any movements that I haven't done in a while. I'm going to be sticking with the things that I'm comfortable with. So I keep the risk of injury low. So I keep the risk of, over fatigue very low, to where I'm starting to manage all these things in a high level of detail as we get closer and closer to the actual day. And so, I don't know, man. Maybe there's something there. Like, if you listen to this on your commute or, on your own, during your own cardio session or whatever, I really hope you pulled a little bit of value from this, especially if you love baseball like I do. And so hopefully if you don't love baseball, I filtered you out from the beginning so you didn't have to hear all my ramblings and my musings here today. But yeah, I think there's something there, man. I mean, baseball is a microcosm for life, right? It's not even about radical physique transformation. It's about just life in general, I think, in many, many ways, if not every single way. And so it made sense for me to kind of tie these two things together. It was actually pretty easy for me to do. And so I hope you guys got a little bit of something from this. If you guys wanted to do me a solid and leave me a rating and a review in the iTunes store, that would be amazing. That would be so terrific. They keep telling me that it helps me in some way. So if you want to take 10 seconds to leave me an honest rating and review, that would be amazing. And then lastly, on your way out the door, hey, mosey on down to the description and scoop up the fat loss formula, right? That's basically the template that I'm using myself, how I structure my weight training, how I structure my cardio, how I structure my nutrition. And it's basically what I've used, to cut 32 pounds so far. It's basically what I'm going to lose and use to lose the last 18 to 20 pounds that still have to go in these final 9 weeks. And so it's totally free. You can give it a look, and maybe it'll give you some insights into your own training, or you can always just give it a look and then quickly delete it, and then there's no harm lost there either. So I hope you guys got something from this. I hope you guys have a really great day, and we'll see you next time.